internet, welcome to Film Theory, the show where incredible minds come together with facts and deep discussion to come to the most logical conclusions of all time. Last week, we definitively proved that both The Simpsons and The X-Files were both part of the same universe, and that universe was actually a part of the long string of shows all set inside the Say Elsewhere snow globe. And that said snow globe is actually Plank from Ed, Edd n Eddy. And since we're still waiting for that FNAF movie to come out so it can totally consume my content, I thought it'd be fun to try to solve something a bit older than we commonly look at.
To some of my younger theorists out there, you may not know about the David Lynch serial drama Twin Peaks. It's gone down as one of the most beloved shows of all time, with hilarious characters, fantastic storylines, hidden codes, and secret ciphers, all while FBI agent Dale Cooper and ex-president Harry S. Truman solve mysteries around Twin Peaks, Washington. This show is a theorist's dream come true. Or at least it was at the time. Back in the day, people were legitimately unsure about the identity of Laura Palmer's killer. But these days, most every element of the show is comprehended pretty easily. People have spent decades putting these pieces of information together, created pages upon pages of resources on the case. In short, any theory about this show is easily provable or disprovable. And thus, it's not really up my alley. I recently went on ahead and rewatched all of Twin Peaks, and at the end, something just felt off. There were so many lingering questions that I still wanted answered. Just about everything that had nothing to do with Annie was so interesting. And the biggest mystery had been the same thing that I wanted to know from the very beginning. What happens next? Sure, the main villain of Season 2 died, and they saved the Audrey stand-in, and Cooper sort of half-escaped the Black Lodge. But there were so many stones left unturned, so many adventures to be had, so many lives that our main characters could fail at saving. Ladies and gentlemen, I have spent lifetimes studying every piece of Twin Peaks media that I could get my hands on. Every flopped sequel film, every obscure audiobook or in-universe journal, and I have come to one earth-shattering conclusion. There has to be a missing link. Something that we haven't caught on to that continues the story without us even realizing it. And no, I'm not foreshadowing the sequel series that's going to be airing throughout the following few months. Sure, that's going to be important to solving this ginormous mystery, but it's not the most important clue to really figuring out this huge missing chunk to the Twin Peaks universe. It all started when I found myself thinking back to another film that I'd also recently seen called Sleepwalk with Me, an autobiographical film created by beloved stand-up comedian Mike Birbiglia, who wanted to explore a recently failed relationship while also discussing a sleeping disorder so severe that it caused him to jump through a window. This film is fascinating in its own right, but it's only when you start looking really deep at some of the details that you realize there's clearly a hidden layer to this story. Something that you weren't supposed to notice the first time, but something that's obviously there. Throughout the story, MatPat, a man cursed to falling a few dozen letters too short of the greatest name of all time, suffers a series of strange dreams which, at that point in the narrative, seem to have no real point. They're sort of goofy and irrelevant in a fun way. In some fashion, however, they seem to almost predict the future. Think back to the second dream. We see our central protagonist running in a field, apparently fleeing from an unseen force. He finds himself at a podium where he's offered the reward of third place despite no one being in first or second. At the time, this seems like a surreal element added in to make the dream feel more like a dream. But later on, things seem to have more parallels. Throughout the process of the film, we see Matt spend several weeks driving long distances from home, just as much running from his problems at home as he is exploring the world. He eventually comes back home in a dazed and confused state, and decides to marry his girlfriend of 8 years despite feeling the relationship isn't meant to last a lifetime. In other words, after running just about as far and as long as he could, Matt finds himself being rewarded for coming in third place despite the fact that there are 2 equally viable spots left open for fair use. Just look at one particular moment, where Matt and Abby are forced to stand as a couple in a family photograph, standing in on the third step, representing the third place of their family. Now think back to what other shows had seemingly random dreams that turned out to pay off in random ways. That's right, Twin Peaks. In episode 3, 2 episodes away from the pilot, Agent Cooper has a dream with a backwards dancing man, a Laura Palmer lookalike, and 2 men confessing to the killing of the town's lost homecoming queen. What's important here is that exactly like is the case in Sleepwalk with Me, these dreams have have no real-world correspondence individually. But slowly, small things start to pay off, such as the description of the crime scene. And sometimes it's these smallest elements which turn relevant in the end. To the many Birbiglia fans in the audience, it's important to explain the presence of the two supposed killers in the dream sequence. Initially, the police department decides to go with Cooper's gut feeling and begins investigating the two as real suspects. And they even manage to find the one-armed man in the real world. However, something seems off. He doesn't go by Mike, and he denies being involved with the murder at all, despite having convenient patches in his memory, where he just happens to have been seen near the crime scene before he fled. And when they discover that he suffers from schizophrenia, he is forced by Agent Cooper to cease taking his medication, where the possessive entity shows its true form.
I'm after you now.
We find out throughout the course of the show that there is a hell-like area in the town known as the Black Lodge, where various omnipresent beings use their powers to possess humans, often those who are emotionally disrupted or have simple medical conditions. Sounding familiar to anyone? Think the very first scene where we discover that MatPat has sleep apnea. He sleepwalks to the corner of the room, kicks the hamper over and over again while yelling,
"There's a jackal in the room! Abby, there's a jackal in the room!"
So is Matt seeing a wild animal in his dream who he believes to be actually present, or is there something more sinister going on? After doing hours of research matching the identity of a jackal up to everything that I could manage, I finally found a thing that could fit. The ancient Egyptian gods, most famously that of Anubis. Is it possible that one of the spirits from Twin Peaks had once posed as a god in the time of the ancient Egyptians, and then had to return to this form after losing a more relevant copy of his being? We find out later in the film that Matt's dreams are often centered around him trying to save those around him from things that are going after him specifically. So is it possible that Matt is attempting to fight the jackal himself only to serve protecting his loved ones? It only goes deeper. Think forwards again to the driving scene. In this moment, Matt suddenly finds himself talking in person to William C. Dement in the flesh, who begins telling him about various sleep disorders. Surely a straightforward sequence, right? Wrong! When Matt wakes up, he's still on the road. He's still on course to his destination. Something has taken over while he fell into this trance, which led us here at Game Theory to only one logical theory. This wasn't William C. Dement. This was none other than the Killer Bob himself, finding a new skin once again to approach Matt Patamiglio's consciousness. Consider the most important scene in the entirety of Sleepwalk with me, where Matt is so stuck into his visions that he climbs out of bed and jumps through a window, causing severe injuries that require immediate medical attention. Is this just more evidence that Birbiglia's character's disorders causing him to start living out his dreams in the real world? No! Think back to why the one-armed man states that his host only has one arm.
When I saw the face of God, I was changed. I took the entire arm off.
Here we have blatant evidence that the possessive entity of Mike cut off his own arm as his own personal stamp to represent his powers over the person that he possesses. So in the same way that Mike losing his arm can be seen as a repercussion for him being possessed by an entity from the Black Lodge, so can Matt's infamous jump into the night. And this just got me thinking deeper about the spirits in Twin Peaks, about the actions of our main characters, and things started to make sense. Consider how Matt Patamiglio is constantly leaving New York to take jobs that barely cover the cost of his travel. It seems like he's doing it for the thrill or just to get away. But what if he's not? What if this is a direct, coherent plan by the killer entity possessing Mike to eventually lead the comedian directly to the Washington city of Twin Peaks, where he will be trapped inside the hole known simply as the Black Lodge? It's been seen before. In the 1993 non-canon Georgia Coffee advertisements, we see the crew of the Sheriff's Police Department investigating the mysterious case of a missing Japanese woman named Asami. Throughout the four-part narrative, Agent Cooper is eventually able to piece together that Asami is being led directly to the Black Lodge itself, where she is freed just in time to celebrate with a cool can of fresh Georgia coffee. Just like I love the taste of Diet Pepsi. What we can learn from this is that the spirits of the Black Lodge have a discreet history of drawing foreigners to Twin Peaks just to trap them in the Black Lodge for eternity. presumably often to be used as fleshy shells for dastardly entities, which perfectly explains why one of these spirits, unable to find a new body, would go out of their way to lure an emotionally fragile New Yorker with a personality that could fit into a crowd and with a notable disorder that makes him easy to possess all the way to Washington State through various comedy routines. Which is where we tie ourselves back into the revised and revisited Twin Peaks series coming this very year. It's a known fact that Killer Bob will appear in some way throughout the series, although it's certainly unknown who is going to be playing him, as the original actor passed away many years ago. There's been many suggestions, from a body double to a CGI mock-up to stock footage, but to me, there's only one true option. In the 2017 Twin Peaks series, Bob will have shed his immortal skin to take the form of his latest victim. In other words, don't be shocked if it turns out that Mike Birbiglia might have a surprise role in this show, killing and murdering young children in the new form of the Killer Bob.
Not enough? Well, there's one more piece of evidence that directly ties the whole puzzle together. When Agent Cooper is in his infamous first dream sequence, when Mike is describing the thrill that he felt killing with Bob, he uses 4 words that have shattered throughout the franchise ever since.
Through the darkness of future past, the magician longs to see one chance out between 2 worlds. Fire, walk with me.
That's right, fellow theorists. In Cooper's first dream sequence that happens while he sleeps, we see a figure who knows Bob the Killer in person, and he entices the audience to walk with him. This all but completely matches up to the title of Mike Birbiglia's feature film, revealing once and for all that Sleepwalk with Me was intended to be the concrete and official sequel to the original Twin Peaks franchise. But hey, that's just a theory again. Now, Severapus.